11 marriages that Hollywood once promoted as perfect love stories. In those glamorous photographs, no one imagined that behind the couple's smiles were infidelity, control, and secrets protected by an entire system of silence. Only when letters, divorce records, and accounts from relatives gradually became public did audiences realize that some wives had truly been partners, while others had merely been turned into cover stories without even knowing it. Sexual orientation is not something to condemn. The real tragedy lies in deception, unequal power, and a society that once forced people to hide who they were by drawing innocent individuals into double lives. From young women controlled by movie studios to icons who sacrificed their health to maintain a perfect image, this is the dark side the cameras never captured. Hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications as we uncover all 11 stories behind these famous marriages.
Behind the glitter, the scars remain. Welcome to Hollywood Stars and Scars.
Number 11. Judy Garland. In 1945, Judy Garland walked toward the altar accompanied by the most powerful man at MGM. Louis B. Mayer personally escorted her to director Vincent Minnelli, creating a picture-perfect scene for the press. The star of The Wizard of Oz was marrying the director who had just helped her beauty and talent shine in Meet Me in St. Louis. From the outside, it appeared to be the union of a muse and the artist who understood her better than anyone else. But Judy did not walk down the aisle as a completely free woman. MGM had controlled her life since she was very young. The studio arranged exhausting work schedules, managed her weight, and supplied pills to keep her awake during long days of filming. At night, she was given medication to help her sleep. Judy's body image and time all belonged to the Hollywood machine. So when the studio encouraged her relationship with Minnelli, she had little reason to be suspicious. Minnelli offered the sense of security Judy was desperately seeking. He was refined, talented, and seemed to see her as more than a profitable star. However, powerful people in the entertainment industry had known about his complicated private life since his years working in New York theater. They did not consider that a reason to protect Judy. On the contrary, a traditional marriage could help everyone involved avoid rumors that might threaten their careers. Judy had grown up in movies where love was always resolved with a song and a kiss. She entered the marriage believing she had finally found a real home. But according to stories told many years later, that illusion collapsed when she unexpectedly returned home and discovered her husband in an intimate situation with a man employed by the household. Although biographers continue to dispute some of the details, the shock Judy experienced is difficult to deny.
Oh my God, imagine how it must have felt for a woman who had been controlled for nearly her entire life to suddenly realize that her sanctuary had also been built upon a reality she had never been allowed to know.
The marriage did not simply fall apart because love was missing. It made Judy question her own ability to recognize the truth. The studio had taught her that appearances mattered more than feelings, and that a beautiful family in the newspapers was more valuable than what actually happened inside the home. Years later, Judy married Mark Harron, her fourth husband. That relationship also ended amid accusations, secrets, and the later revelation that Harron had relationships with men. Looking back, I do not see a woman who was simply unlucky in love. I see a girl trained by an entire empire to accept realities written by other people, as long as she continued smiling whenever the cameras began to roll. Judy sang about rainbows, homes, and better places, but her life revealed a bitter truth. The woman who brought hope to millions of people was often denied honesty inside her own home. And while Judy's case shows how deeply a movie studio could interfere, the next woman did not even receive a direct explanation.
Number 10. Angela Lansbury.
One day, in 1946, Angela Lansbury returned home and found a note. There was no husband waiting for her, no final conversation, no argument or apology. Richard Cromwell had packed his belongings and left, leaving behind a few lines explaining that their marriage could not continue. Angela was only 20 years old, and the marriage had lasted less than a year. Before that, everything had happened at breathtaking speed. Angela was just 19 when she married Cromwell, who was about 16 years older than she was. She was a young British actress who had made an extraordinary impression in Gaslight and received an Oscar nomination for her very first film role. Cromwell had once been a famous and handsome screen star, sophisticated, experienced, and seemingly in possession of all the stability a young woman far from home might need. Angela was attracted to that maturity, but she did not yet have enough experience to understand that polished social behavior did not necessarily reflect a person's private reality. She later admitted openly that she had never imagined her husband might be gay. In the conservative society of the 1940s, many young people did not even have the language needed to understand what was happening directly in front of them. Angela's pain did not come only from being abandoned. It came from discovering that she had taken part in a story in which the bride was the only person who did not know the entire plot. Cromwell may have been under tremendous pressure to conceal who he was, but Angela was also denied the right to make a decision based on the full truth. One person forced to live in darkness had unintentionally pulled another person into it with him. What is remarkable is that Angela did not try to destroy Cromwell's reputation. She kept the story private for decades, and later continued to speak about him with compassion. The shock did not make her bitter. It forced her to mature far earlier than her age should have required. Strangely enough, the woman who would later become an icon of calmness and wisdom on television learned her first lesson about trust through a cold note left inside an empty house. But Cromwell's note only ended a brief marriage. The next case allegedly involved a powerful agent, the tabloid press, and a movie studio, willing to do anything to protect its most valuable symbol of masculinity. Number 9. Phyllis Gates. In November 1955, Rock Hudson and Phyllis Gates were married in Santa Barbara. The wedding was arranged so quickly that it resembled a crisis management campaign more than the final chapter of a long romance. Hudson was then one of Universal Pictures' biggest male stars. Tall, handsome, and carrying an image of masculinity that seemed almost impossible to challenge, he was the fantasy the studio was selling to millions of American women. However, agent Henry Wilson understood that this image was in danger. Scandal magazines had begun paying attention to Hudson's private life. At a time when a rumor about homosexuality could end a contract, destroy box office earnings, and turn an idol into a Hollywood outcast, Wilson needed an immediate solution. That solution appeared inside his own office. Phyllis Gates was Wilson's secretary, young, discreet, and perfectly suited to the image of a respectable wife. Even today, the biggest question has never been conclusively answered. Did Phyllis know what the marriage was expected to protect? She always insisted that she genuinely loved Hudson and knew nothing about his relationships with men before they married. Some people within the film industry doubted her account because she worked closely with Henry Wilson, a man who understood the secrets of the clients he represented. I think the most frightening part is that both possibilities are heartbreaking. If Phyllis truly knew nothing, she was placed inside a marriage designed to protect the profits of powerful men. If she understood part of the arrangement, she still had to endure the pressure of maintaining it every day. She had to appear beside Hudson, entertain guests, smile for photographers, and make sure that no expression or gesture raised suspicion. When the cameras disappeared, the distance between them continued to grow. Hudson was frequently away from home, and emotional intimacy gradually vanished. The marriage ended after only about 3 years. Hudson remained a leading star, and his image was almost completely unharmed. Phyllis was left carrying the label of the wife from a failed marriage, while most of the truth still could not be discussed publicly. She later described her experience and continued to insist that she had been deceived. Skeptics continued questioning how much she had known. For the rest of her life, Phyllis remained trapped between two identities she could not control. One side viewed her as an innocent woman who had been exploited. The other considered her a participant in the cover-up. Neither version allowed her to be remembered simply as herself. Rock Hudson was also a victim of a cruel era that punished people who did not conform to accepted standards. But the oppression he suffered does not erase the pain Phyllis experienced. This is what Hollywood rarely acknowledges. A system can harm several people at the same time, forcing them to protect social roles that none of them truly wanted to perform. Phyllis Gates may have entered an arrangement she understood fully, partially or not at all. The next woman appears to have been more aware of her husband's past, but that awareness did nothing to make the price she paid any easier. Number 8. Barry Berenson. Barry Berenson met Anthony Perkins at a party in 1972. Before that, as a fashion photographer, she had already become very familiar with the distinctive face of the man who had terrified audiences in Psycho. Perkins possessed a fragile, mysterious beauty and always seemed to carry a sense of unease that was difficult to define. Barry was lively, intelligent, well-connected within New York's artistic circles, and nothing like the young brides guided by movie studios during Hollywood's golden age. She entered the relationship with the experience and instincts of someone who understood the entertainment industry. Rumors about Perkins's private life had existed for years, and he had been involved with men before the marriage. Because of that, Barry's story does not fit easily into the image of a completely innocent wife. It is very possible that a complicated understanding existed between them, one they never publicly explained. They built a family, had 2 sons, and created what Perkins seemed to desire intensely: a stable home, protected from the rumors and judgments that could have destroyed his artistic legacy. Barry was not merely a wife who appeared in photographs. She became the guardian at the door, the person who prevented the outside world from entering the private space their family had created. Then the 1980s arrived, and the AIDS crisis completely changed the dangers surrounding secrets that had once remained hidden. When Perkins's health began to decline, Barry did not leave. She controlled information, restricted media access, and tried to allow her husband to spend his final days in privacy. While the press hungered for a sensational story, she turned their home into the final boundary between a sick human being and an industry that always wanted to transform pain into headlines. There was something both noble and deeply sad about that choice. Barry protected the man she loved, but she was also forced to make her own story smaller. Her fear, loneliness, and the questions she may have carried were all placed behind the need to keep Perkins's condition private. No camera captured the nights when she had to confront reality, while still preventing the world from discovering what was happening the following morning. She was not a disposable prop, used and then discarded. She was someone who willingly stood in the middle of the storm, even though that willingness had been shaped by a society that offered her family almost no safe alternatives. But while Barry transformed love into a protective fortress, the next woman turned marriage into a negotiation that continued for 33 years. Number 7. Elsa Lanchester. Elsa Lanchester and Charles Laughton appeared to be an unusual but captivating artistic couple. Both were British actors with sharp intellects, powerful personalities, and styles unlike anyone else in 1930s Hollywood. Elsa became immortal through the image of the electrified haired bride in Bride of Frankenstein. Laughton was an actor of enormous talent, capable of silencing an entire theater with a single glance. But during the early years of their life together, Elsa began to sense an emptiness that fame could not fill. Physical intimacy was almost non-existent. There was no shocking moment when she caught him in the act, and no secret photograph appeared in a newspaper. There were only silent nights, unanswered questions, and the growing realization that her marriage did not function the way she had once expected. Eventually, Laughton confessed that he was attracted to men. In that era, such an admission threatened more than a reputation. Sexual relationships between men could still lead to prosecution in Britain, and Hollywood could eliminate an actor based solely on unproven whispers. Elsa had to choose between leaving and risking the exposure of his secret, or rebuilding her entire definition of their marriage. She stayed. That decision did not transform everything into a comforting, romantic story. Elsa and Laughton became artistic partners, companions, and protectors of one another. He valued her intelligence, humor, and talent. She understood his deepest fears. But it also meant that Elsa had to surrender the version of married life she had once believed she would have. Love existed, but not in the form she had expected when she married him. For 33 years, they continuously adjusted the boundaries between friendship, marriage, career, and secrets that could have destroyed everything. Elsa became someone who helped create a shared life, rather than a bride waiting for her husband to change. What moves me is that she had the power to choose, while also being severely limited by her era. She chose to stay, but her other options were never truly safe. They proved that a marriage could contain profound loyalty, even when it did not fit a traditional model. At the same time, their story raises an uncomfortable question. How many personal needs must someone sacrifice to protect the person they love from society's cruelty? And when both people understand the arrangement, does the silence become any less burdensome? The next case takes that question to another level. Because in Janet Gaynor's marriage, it is possible that both husband and wife needed the protection a traditional family could provide. Number 6, Janet Gaynor. Janet Gaynor was the first woman to win the Academy Award for Best Actress. Her gentle face and emotionally expressive eyes once represented the innocent beauty of silent cinema. In 1939, she married Gilbert Adrian, the legendary MGM costume designer. Adrian had created gowns for Greta Garbo and helped shape the dazzling visual world of The Wizard of Oz. The press viewed them as a perfect union between a muse and the man who created beauty. They were famous, wealthy, artistically sophisticated, and both stood at the top of Hollywood's creative world. But within their private circles, Adrian's attraction to men was considered a fairly well-known secret. Janet had worked in the industry long enough that it would have been difficult for her to know nothing about the rumors surrounding the man she was about to marry. What makes the story even more complicated are the long-standing rumors about Janet's own private life, particularly her close relationship with actress Mary Martin. There is no basis for treating every rumor as confirmed truth. However, many film historians believe that the marriage between Janet and Adrian may have been an alliance that offered protection to both of them, rather than a one-sided plan to deceive the wife. They had a son, hosted elegant parties, and maintained the image of a respectable family for many years. That does not necessarily mean their home was completely false. Janet and Adrian shared affection, respect, and a bond strong enough to survive through many stages of life. But they also understood that a single malicious article could destroy their careers, their custody rights, and their family's social position. So, was this a tragedy? In my opinion, the answer is still yes, but in a more subtle way. They did not necessarily deceive each other. They were forced to perform a socially approved version of themselves in order to live with relative safety. Janet's most difficult role may not have appeared in any film. It existed in the family photographs, where every detail had to reassure the public that there was nothing to question. Janet and Adrian may have entered their arrangement with a relatively equal understanding, but the next woman did not have that privilege. She spent 25 years believing she understood the man sleeping beside her, until a confession in middle age forced her to reconsider her entire life. Number 5, Charlotte Raye. Before becoming the warm and caring Mrs. Garrett on The Facts of Life, Charlotte Raye built a life with composer John Strauss. They married, raised 2 sons, and endured years of uncertainty within the entertainment industry. Their marriage lasted a quarter of a century. It was not a few months, designed to silence rumors, or a temporary publicity photograph. It was 25 years of meals, vacations, family responsibilities, and shared memories. Then, Strauss told his wife that he was attracted to men. He suggested that they maintain an open marriage, preserving the family while allowing him to explore the part of himself that had been suppressed for so long. For Strauss, the confession may have been the moment when he finally dared to live honestly. For Charlotte, it was the sound of the foundation collapsing beneath everything she believed they had built. She did not only have to confront a different future, she had to return to the past and examine every memory. Had their intimate moments been real? What had caused the times when he seemed distant? Had she missed certain signs, or had there simply been no way for her to recognize them? This is a uniquely cruel form of pain, because a truth revealed late in life can recolor decades of memories. Charlotte did not agree to an open marriage. She chose divorce, refusing to become a supporting character inside a relationship structure she had never chosen. What matters is that she did not publicly turn Strauss into a monster. She understood that he had also lived with fear and internal conflict. But compassion did not mean she was required to continue sacrificing her own need. The actress who had spent years playing a woman who gave guidance to young people eventually had to learn how to begin again after reaching middle age herself. I believe that is the most powerful part of the story. Charlotte could not recover those 25 years with a fuller version of the truth, but she could decide who the remaining years of her life would belong to. Number 4, Carol Channing. Onstage, Carol Channing was a force of nature. Her distinctive voice, wide eyes, and unforgettable energy made her one of Broadway's greatest icons. She performed Hello Dolly thousands of times, bringing joy to audiences night after night. Behind that career stood Charles Lowe, her husband and manager, who handled her finances and controlled much of her professional life. Lowe created the image of a devoted man protecting his wife from outside pressures. He arranged schedules, managed contracts, and stood between Carol and the harsh business world. That dependence may initially have given her a sense of security, but over the years, the protective layer gradually began to resemble a wall that isolated her from her own money information and ability to make decisions. In her divorce filings, Carol revealed a detail that shocked the public. She said that during more than 40 years together, they had only been physically intimate once or twice during the early period of their relationship. She had explained his coldness through their work schedules, Lowe's personality, and the pressures that came with fame. She did not want to confront the emptiness because the same man also controlled nearly the entire system that kept her life functioning. As her health declined and Carol began paying closer attention to her finances, she discovered things that caused her serious concern. In allegations presented during the divorce, she claimed that Lowe had used her money to support his private lifestyle and relationships with men. Those statements emerged during a bitter legal dispute, and therefore must be understood as Carol's allegations. But her feeling of betrayal was entirely real. What makes this story horrifying is not simply the lack of intimacy. It is the way love, money, and managerial power became so intertwined that Carol could barely determine where care ended and control began. The man she trusted most was not only her husband, he was also the only doorway to her finances, schedule, and the outside world. At an age when many people are enjoying peace beside a lifelong partner, Carol had to dismantle a life that had existed for 41 years. She did not simply leave a man. She escaped an entire system that had been constructed around her. If there is one painful lesson here, it is that love should never require a person to surrender complete control of their life to someone else. But even Carol Channing was able to file a lawsuit and leave the marriage. The next woman was bound not only by family or money, she was tied to an institution, a crown, and the eyes of hundreds of millions of people. Number 3. Princess Margaret. In 1960, more than 300 million viewers were reportedly watching when Margaret married photographer Anthony Armstrong Jones. It was the first royal wedding to be widely televised and a modern public spectacle that the British monarchy desperately needed. After the heartbreak involving Peter Townsend, the public wanted to see Margaret finally find love. Armstrong Jones appeared to be the perfect man to begin that new chapter. He was charismatic, talented, and belonged to a free-spirited, artistic world, far removed from the rigid corridors of the palace. Margaret may have viewed his rebelliousness as a breath of freedom, but that same world also contained relationships and ways of living that a princess raised in a conservative environment had almost no opportunity to understand fully. Biographers continue to debate how much Margaret knew before the wedding about Armstrong Jones's relationships with both women and men. What is clearer is that after the marriage, their differences became increasingly toxic. He could not tolerate royal rituals. She could not simply abandon her position. Both were trapped inside a life that gradually transformed dissatisfaction into coldness and cruelty. One detail often repeated is that Armstrong Jones left mocking notes inside Margaret's books. The messages were reportedly aimed directly at her confidence and appearance. It was not a loud scandal splashed across newspaper headlines. It was a smaller kind of wound, repeated in private, while outsiders saw only a princess surrounded by privilege. Margaret still had to appear on balconies, attend ceremonies, and smile before the public. She was not merely an unhappy wife. She represented an institution that valued external stability more than private emotion. Every time she waved to a crowd, she continued preserving the image of a family that she knew was falling apart. Armstrong Jones also faced pressure from living inside a royal cage where he did not belong. But his secret relationships and cruelty within the marriage turned Margaret into the person forced to pay for that dissatisfaction. The man who entered royal society through her position later made her feel punished for the very status that had elevated him. Margaret's story shows that a crown cannot protect a woman from loneliness. But the next case is heartbreaking in a different way. When Martha Raye married for the final time, the spotlight had almost completely moved away from her. She was no longer searching for fame. Perhaps she was simply afraid of dying alone. Number 2. Martha Raye. For decades, Martha Raye was an almost unstoppable source of energy. She sang, performed comedy, and repeatedly traveled to war zones to entertain American service members. Martha did not simply appear before the cameras and leave. She stayed in harsh conditions, trying to bring laughter to places where death was always present. By the early 1990s, her health had declined severely after several strokes. In 1991, at the age of 75, Martha married for the 7th time. Her husband was Mark Harris, a 42-year-old event organizer. Their age difference, her cognitive condition, and Harris's private life caused her family to fear that Martha might no longer have been mentally capable of fully understanding her younger husband's motives. The controversy quickly became a legal battle involving Martha's property mental capacity and caregiving rights. However, the story was not entirely simple because Harris genuinely remained beside her during the final years of her life. He helped with her daily needs, pushed her wheelchair, and provided companionship after many people from the entertainment industry had stopped visiting. Whether it was love calculation or a mixture of both is something no one can state with complete certainty. Perhaps Martha understood more than her family believed, or perhaps her illness made her vulnerable to exploitation. But the most heartbreaking possibility is that she recognized the troubling circumstances and accepted them anyway, because having someone sitting beside her felt easier than facing the final days of her life alone. The woman who had once comforted soldiers on battlefields was ultimately surrounded by lawyers, suspicion, and disputes, leaving behind a question that has never been answered about who was truly protecting her and who may have been taking advantage of her. Number 1. Amanda Blake. In Gunsmoke, Amanda Blake played Miss Kitty Russell, the sharp and intelligent woman who ran a saloon in Dodge City. For nearly 2 decades, she convinced audiences that Miss Kitty always understood what was happening and was rarely fooled. Strong, glamorous, and independent, the character became one of the most beloved female figures in Western television. In 1984, Amanda married Mark Spaeth, a real estate developer who had served on the city council of Austin, Texas. The marriage appeared to offer her stability after years of living under Hollywood spotlight, while also helping Spaeth create the image of a respectable family man within a conservative political environment. However, later accounts suggested that his private life was far more complicated than his public image. Spaeth died about a year after the wedding from causes believed to have been related to AIDS. Amanda lived for another 4 years and died in 1989. The public was initially told that she had cancer, but her doctor later stated that her death was also connected to complications from AIDS. Some sources claim that Amanda contracted the virus from Spaeth, although public records are not sufficient to confirm the exact timing or method of transmission. The greatest tragedy was not only the illness, but also the silence created by stigma and fear. When people cannot be honest about their health and the risks within a relationship, others can lose the opportunity to protect themselves. On screen, Amanda had portrayed a woman who always knew what was happening around her, but in real life, she may have entered a marriage in which the most important truths were never given to her. 11 women and 11 marriages, with different degrees of truth and deception. Some knew nothing. Some suspected the truth, but remained silent. Some willingly participated in an arrangement, while others only understood the complete reality after several decades. These stories should not be transformed into attacks against gay or bisexual people, because it was prejudice itself that forced many individuals to live double lives. However, social pressure cannot erase a partner's right to know the truth. We can sympathize with one person's fear, while also recognizing that deception within a marriage still leaves profound emotional wounds. The greatest lesson does not apply only to Hollywood, but to every relationship. Do not surrender complete control of your finances, health, or future to anyone simply because you love them. Speak honestly about fidelity, boundaries, and risks that could affect both people. Hollywood once sold the public perfect photographs, but no photograph showed who cried after the cameras were turned off. Fame cannot prevent betrayal. Money cannot guarantee intimacy. And a marriage lasting many years does not necessarily mean that two people truly understood each other. Which person in today's stories made you think the most? Share your opinion in the comments, but please, remain respectful toward people who were forced to live under circumstances very different from the world we know today. If this video helped you see Hollywood from a new perspective, hit like and subscribe to Hollywood Stars and Scars so you do not miss the secrets, tragedies, and buried stories hidden behind the glamour. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. Remember that the truth can sometimes be painful, but a relationship without truth is even more painful. May you always have enough courage to live honestly, enough awareness to protect yourself, and enough compassion not to turn another person's fear into judgment. I will see you again in the next story from Hollywood Stars and Scars. They once owned mansions, private jets, multi-million-dollar contracts, and had thousands of people screaming their names beneath the stage lights. But then, a single bad decision, a terrible contract, an addiction, or a family that did not know how to protect them, turned the Hollywood dream into a freefall. Some lost every dollar they had, some were left without a home, and some paid a price even more painful than bankruptcy. The most frightening part is that many of these tragedies did not happen behind closed doors. They unfolded in full view of the public while old movies continued to air and canned laughter kept playing. Today, I will take you back to those glamorous years to explore 30 stories Hollywood once wanted to forget. The closer we get to the final position, the colder the line between fame and tragedy will become. If you enjoy stories about what happens behind the spotlight, press like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you do not miss the next secrets.
Behind the glitter, the scars remain. Welcome to Hollywood Stars and Scars.
Number 30. Larry King. Before the black-framed glasses and microphone turned Larry King into a television icon, he once entered a courtroom with his reputation nearly destroyed. In the early 1970s, Larry was accused of taking $5,000 from a business partner. The charges did not ultimately lead to a conviction, but the media did not wait for the verdict. He lost his job and was virtually pushed out of journalism for several years. By 1978, Larry was carrying approximately $350,000 in debt and had to file for bankruptcy. No show of his own, no studio, and no powerful voice. But instead of disappearing, he returned through small radio programs and gradually built Larry King Live into one of the most famous talk shows in America. This is the first reminder that failure can be an opening chapter. However, the next man had to use bankruptcy law to protect an entire empire. Number 29. 50 Cent. When Indie Club was playing in every nightclub, Curtis Jackson, better known as 50 Cent, was more than a successful rapper. He was a symbol of survival, an entrepreneur who turned music branding and television into a fortune estimated at more than $100 million. That image made his appearance in bankruptcy records in 2015 a major shock to his fans. A lawsuit involving the unauthorized posting of a private video resulted in 50 Cent being ordered to pay millions of dollars in damages. At the same time, several other financial obligations began closing in. He chose Chapter 11 bankruptcy to restructure his finances rather than simply being broke, as tabloid headlines described it. He later made a powerful comeback in television and production. But the next man spent money in ways that seemed possible only in a bizarre movie. Number 28. Nicolas Cage. Nicolas Cage once earned tens of millions of dollars a year and possessed enough wealth to allow several generations to live comfortably. But Cage did not shop like an ordinary millionaire. He purchased castles in Europe, properties in several cities, an island in the Bahamas, a New Orleans mansion famous for its dark history, and an unbelievable collection of unusual objects. Among them were an expensive pet octopus and a dinosaur skull that Cage later had to return after it was determined to have been illegally obtained. A series of unpaid tax bills, combined with the cost of maintaining his properties, forced him to sell assets under unfavorable conditions. Nicolas accepted role after role to repay his debts and eventually reclaimed his position. But not every star who bought real estate stopped at a mansion. The next person once purchased almost an entire town. Number 27. Kim Basinger. By the end of the 1980s, Kim Basinger embodied classic Hollywood beauty. Batman brought her face to audiences around the world, while her later Oscar proved that Kim was more than a symbol of physical beauty. But while the money was flowing in, She and a group of investors spent approximately $20 million to purchase most of the land in the town of Brazelton, Georgia, hoping to transform it into a tourist destination and film production center. The project did not develop as planned. Around the same time, Kim withdrew from the film Boxing Helena after a controversial agreement and was sued. A jury initially awarded $8.1 million in damages, leading her to file for bankruptcy in 1993. Although the ruling was later overturned and the dispute was settled, Kim rebuilt her career, but the next story shows that even a $1 million voice cannot save a bad contract. Number 26, Toni Braxton. In 1996, Unbreak My Heart remained at the top of the Billboard Hot 100 for 11 weeks. Toni Braxton's deep, elegant voice made her seem like an unshakable queen. But while her albums were selling millions of copies, Toni said that the amount of money she actually received was far smaller than the public imagined. An unfavorable recording contract turned into a prolonged legal battle. In 1998, Toni filed for bankruptcy for the first time. She admitted that her extravagant shopping habits also contributed to making the situation worse. After making a comeback, health problems forced her to cancel a Las Vegas residency in 2008, creating new financial obligations and leading to her second bankruptcy filing in 2010. Toni continued performing, proving her remarkable resilience. However, the next case did not begin with a music contract, but with a challenge against the federal government.
Number 25, Wesley Snipes.
During the 1990s, Wesley Snipes moved across the screen with almost complete confidence. New Jack City, White Men Can't Jump, and the Blade franchise made him one of the most powerful black action stars in Hollywood. But while Blade was destroying vampires on screen, another battle was quietly taking shape inside Wesley's tax records. He was convicted of failing to file federal income tax returns for 3 years and was sentenced to 3 years in prison in 2008. Wesley began serving his sentence in 2010 after several years of legal disputes. This is not the story of someone who failed to earn money, but of the consequences of trusting dangerous tax arguments. After his release, he gradually returned to acting. But the next man did not need to enter prison to watch a $1 million career become buried beneath unpaid bills.
Number 24, Stephen Baldwin. Stephen Baldwin appeared in Born on the 4th of July and The Usual Suspects films, significant enough to secure a respectable place in Hollywood history. As a member of the famous Baldwin family, he seemed to have every connection needed to maintain a stable life. But major acting roles gradually became less frequent, while taxes, mortgages, and loans continued coming due. In 2009, Stephen filed for bankruptcy, reporting more than $2 million in debt. There were no Bengal tigers castles or gold bathtubs in this story. There were only financial obligations that had accumulated over many years, quietly but relentlessly. It took him nearly a decade to complete the bankruptcy process. If his case was death by 1,000 small bills, the next person showed that massive corporations could fail repeatedly while a personal brand continued to survive. Number 23, Donald Trump. Long before entering politics, Donald Trump built the image of a real estate businessman who always won. His name appeared on hotels, casinos, and numerous glamorous buildings. However, behind that brand was a series of projects financed with enormous amounts of debt, particularly in Atlantic City. When revenue was no longer enough to meet loan obligations, the businesses began turning to bankruptcy court. 6 corporate bankruptcies involving Trump's hotel and casino companies occurred between 1991 and 2009. It is important to clarify that he did not file for personal bankruptcy. The companies used Chapter 11 to restructure their debts, while many creditors, contractors, and investors were forced to accept losses. The image of success remained intact. But the next person could not restructure a lifestyle involving 200 employees and an enormous mansion.
Number 22, MC Hammer. You could not touch him. Or at least, that was how it felt in the early 1990s. MC Hammer sold millions of albums, wore the baggy pants that became his trademark, and earned approximately $30 million in a single year at the height of his career. He built a mansion worth tens of millions of dollars, maintained a huge entourage, and employed around 200 people, many of whom were friends or relatives. His expenses were reportedly reaching hundreds of thousands of dollars every month. When music sales declined, that entire operation still required money to continue running. In 1996, Hammer filed for bankruptcy with approximately $13 million in debt. What makes me respect him is that after his fall, Hammer did not run away. He continued doing business, performing, and paying the obligations he was able to resolve. But the next star spent tens of millions of dollars on restaurants, horses, and a life designed like an action movie. Number 21. Burt Reynolds. There was a time when Burt Reynolds' smile mustache and posture behind the wheel defined masculinity on the American screen. Smokey and the Bandit and The Cannonball Run helped make him one of the highest-paid actors in the world. Burt owned homes, airplanes, helicopters, cars, hundreds of horses, and a lifestyle that caused a fortune, estimated in the tens of millions of dollars, to disappear rapidly. But his most painful investment came from the restaurant industry. The Po Folks chain and later projects produced major losses, while his divorce from Lonnie Anderson and unpaid loans pushed him toward the edge. In 1996, Burt filed for bankruptcy with approximately $10 million in debt. He still returned with Boogie Nights and earned an Oscar nomination. However, if Burt spent money like a star, the next person spent as though money could never run out. Number 20. Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson once entered the boxing ring with eyes so cold that his opponents seemed defeated before the opening bell. His brief fights earned him hundreds of millions of dollars throughout his career. But behind the lights was a massive, money-burning machine made up of mansions, luxury cars, jewelry, an entourage, legal fees, taxes, support payments, and almost unimaginable extravagant gifts. Tyson once kept Bengal tigers and purchased a gold bathtub worth millions of dollars for his wife at the time. In 2003, he filed for bankruptcy with approximately $23 million in debt, despite having earned more than $300 million during his career. Mike later rebuilt his image through books, stage performances, podcasts, and business ventures. But the next story is even stranger, because an athlete placed his entire fortune into a video game world that had not yet been completed. Number 19. Curt Schilling. On the baseball field, Curt Schilling was known for his precision ability to perform under pressure and historic moments in competition. His Major League Baseball career earned him more than $100 million. After retiring, Schilling did not choose a quiet life. He founded 38 studios with the ambition of building a video game empire capable of competing with the biggest names in the industry. Curt invested tens of millions of dollars of his own money. The state of Rhode Island guaranteed a $75 million loan to persuade the company to relocate there, but costs rose quickly and funding disappeared before its major projects could be completed. In 2012, 38 studios closed, hundreds of people lost their jobs, and Schilling said he had lost most of his fortune. The company filed for bankruptcy, although he did not personally file for bankruptcy, as some accounts have claimed. The next man also earned tens of millions through sports, only to watch it disappear. Number 18. Jose Canseco. Jose Canseco was once the face of power in American baseball. His swings sent balls flying out of stadiums at speeds that made spectators jump to their feet, while his 1988 Most Valuable Player award confirmed his status as a superstar. During his career, Canseco earned approximately $45 million in salary, not including endorsement income. But 2 divorces, taxes, legal expenses, and uncontrolled decisions gradually eroded that fortune. In 2012, Jose filed for bankruptcy, reporting approximately $21,000 in assets and more than $1.7 million in debt. He often claimed that managers, relatives, former wives, and the financial system had all contributed to his situation. But the cold reality remained. A man could read a pitch traveling more than 100 miles per hour and still fail to see the debt coming toward him. And the next person once dominated the runway but could not walk past the IRS with a perfect stride. Number 17. Janice Dickinson. Janice Dickinson has always called herself the world's first supermodel. Although that title remains disputed, no one can deny that she appeared on countless magazine covers, worked with leading photographers, and became a familiar television personality through America's Next Top Model. Her decades-long career led the public to believe that Janice must have built a stable financial foundation. The reality was completely different. In 2013, Janice filed for bankruptcy with approximately $19,000 in reported assets and nearly $1 million in debt. Most of it came from unpaid taxes, along with medical bills and personal obligations. The woman who once sold an image of perfection to the entire world was now surrounded by paperwork and creditors. But while Janice lost money over many years, the next star believed that tens of millions of dollars belonging to her had been taken by other people. Number 16. Courtney Love. Courtney Love has never moved quietly. She appeared on stage like a storm, singing with a raspy voice, wearing baby doll dresses and turning chaos into art. After Kurt Cobain's death, the rights connected to the Nirvana music catalog became enormously valuable assets. But Courtney's life was quickly consumed by addiction, child custody disputes, lawsuits, and battles over the management of her property. Courtney once claimed that approximately $27 million belonging to her and her family had been lost or mismanaged. Some stories describe it as money she simply spent, but the truth is far more complicated and involves allegations of fraud in legal disputes. What is certain is that millions of dollars disappeared during a chaotic period. Courtney continued working as an artist, but the next case shows how chaos can become a conspiracy theory that leaves all of Hollywood stunned. Number 15. Randy Quaid. Randy Quaid was once a critically respected actor, earning an Oscar nomination for The Last Detail, before becoming the eccentric Cousin Eddie in National Lampoon's Vacation. He had more than 90 acting credits and earned enough money to live securely. But in 2009, Randy and his wife Evie were arrested following a dispute over a hotel bill and the use of invalid payment information. 1 year later, they were accused of illegally occupying a house they had previously owned. The couple left the United States for Canada and claimed they were being hunted by a secret group called the Starwhackers. Those statements left the public both confused and concerned. Lawsuits, arrest warrants, and years away from Hollywood caused Randy's finances to decline severely. They eventually began living a quieter life in Vermont. But the next person once slept in a car only a short distance from the star bearing his name. Number 14. Danny Bonaducci. In the Partridge Family, Danny Bonaducci was the clever, red-haired boy who always had a line that made audiences laugh. Fame arrived when Danny was far too young to understand that a television show could end while family trauma remained. After the series concluded, he faced addiction arrests and a career that repeatedly fell apart. In 1990, an almost unbelievable irony occurred when Danny traveled to Florida for an event with an anti-drug message and was then arrested while attempting to buy cocaine. At one point, he lived in his car in Hollywood, only a short distance from his own star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. However, Danny found his way back through radio and maintained a career for many years. If this is a story of recovery, the next case began again aboard a cruise ship. Number 13. Willie Ames. By the late 1970s, Willie Ames was a face appearing on the bedroom walls of millions of teenagers. 8 is Enough and Charles in Charge made him a television idol who at one point earned more than $1 million a year. But acting roles dried up, his marriage ended, and alcohol and drugs filled the emptiness left behind by the applause. Willie said he once slept beneath bushes and inside parking garages and had to count every coin he had to buy gasoline. Oh my God, the distance between primetime television and having nowhere to live can sometimes be only a few years. Willie became sober, rediscovered his faith, and then accepted a job aboard a cruise ship, rising from an entertainment activities employee to cruise director. He later returned to acting, but the next person had to ask the public for help to avoid losing her home once again. Number 12. Brett Butler. Brett Butler stepped onto comedy stages with a sharp Southern voice and the ability to turn personal wounds into laughter. Grace Under Fire became one of ABC's most successful sitcoms of the 1990s, bringing her fame and a very high income. But substance abuse made Brett's behavior increasingly difficult to control, while the set became a place of constant tension. In 1998, the show was abruptly canceled. The role disappeared, her savings declined, and Brett left Hollywood for Georgia. She later admitted that she had become homeless and had to begin again through small jobs. In 2021, while she was in poor health and her opportunities had been affected by the pandemic, friends launched a fundraising campaign to help her cover living expenses. Brett survived, but the next story brought an actress all the way to a hospital bed before she made a remarkable comeback. Number 11. Natasha Lyonne. Her raspy voice, red hair, and slightly rebellious intelligence made Natasha Lyonne stand out from the moment she appeared in American Pie. She did not need to try to play a cool girl. That defiance seemed naturally present in every look she gave. But in the early 2000s, that image changed from appealing to alarming, as Natasha faced addiction legal trouble and eviction from her apartment. In 2005, she was hospitalized in serious condition, with hepatitis C, a heart infection, and several other health problems. At one point, Natasha had almost no career and no stable place to live. She entered treatment, became sober, and returned one small role at a time. Orange is the New Black, Russian Doll, and Poker Face later turned her into a powerful actress, writer, and director. But not everyone photographed on the streets has found a way back. Number 10. Lonnie Willison. There was a time when Lonnie Willison appeared in fitness photo shoots with tan skin, a strong body, and a perfect smile. Her marriage to Baywatch actor Jeremy Jackson made her seem like part of the California dream. But after the relationship ended in 2014, Lonnie's mental health, employment, and finances all declined at the same time. By around 2016, she had lost her apartment and her car. Years later, photographers spotted Lonnie pushing a cart filled with belongings to the streets of Los Angeles, searching for food and refusing several offers of assistance. What makes me uncomfortable is that the cameras continued recording her. The only difference was that they were no longer celebrating her. Lonnie became content for the tabloids. But the next case carried a lasting sense of guilt from a horrifying accident. Number 9. Leif Garrett. By the end of the 1970s, Leif Garrett's face covered teenage magazines. His blonde hair, dreamy smile, and pop songs made him the fantasy of an entire generation. Leif became famous at an extremely young age and was given money cars and freedom, but almost no boundaries. Drugs entered his life before he was mature enough to understand the consequences. In 1979, while under the influence, Leif crashed his car, leaving his friend Roland Winkler paralyzed. Guilt followed him, while his music career declined and arrests continued to occur. In 2010, he was arrested again for heroin possession. Leif has spoken about his attempts to become sober and accept responsibility for his past. But the wound from that night cannot be erased. And the next person also became famous as a child before eventually suing his own parents. Number 8. Gary Coleman. The line, "What you talking about, Willis?" became part of popular culture through Gary Coleman in different strokes. Despite his small stature caused by congenital kidney disease and years of treatment, Gary had enough energy to carry a successful sitcom. At the height of his career, he earned tens of thousands of dollars per episode and was considered one of the most famous child stars in America. As an adult, Gary discovered that most of his fortune had disappeared. He sued his adoptive parents and business manager, winning more than $1 million in damages, but still had to file for bankruptcy in 1999. Health problems limited acting roles, and legal trouble continued to follow him. Gary worked as a security guard and sold autographs to support himself. He died in 2010 after suffering a head injury. But the next girl never even received a late career comeback. Number 7. Erin Moran. In Happy Days, Erin Moran played Joni Cunningham, the lovable younger sister who made audiences feel as though they were watching a member of their own family. The character became so popular that Erin was given her own series, Joni Loves Chachi. However, the show quickly failed. When Erin returned to Happy Days, the television era had changed, and Hollywood no longer seemed to know what to do with her. The acting roles disappeared, while financial difficulties and personal problems forced Erin to live in a mobile home in Indiana with her husband's family. After leaving that home, her life remained unstable, and tabloids described her as a former star who had lost everything. In 2017, Erin died at the age of 56 from advanced squamous cell carcinoma. It was not drugs, as many early rumors had claimed, and that was the most bitter part of all. Number 6. John Drew Barrymore. John Drew Barrymore was born with a surname that was almost part of American theatrical history. He was the son of John Barrymore, and later became the father of Drew Barrymore. Hollywood expected a worthy successor, and his early roles in High Lonesome and The Sundowners showed that John had both the appearance and talent to fulfill that expectation. But an unstable childhood and a complicated relationship with fame quickly pulled him in another direction. Arrests, public conflicts, alcohol, and unpredictable behavior gradually caused the studios to turn away from John. He traveled to Europe, returned to America, and then disappeared from public life for many years. Friends called him the ghost of the Barrymore family. As John's health declined, Drew Barrymore financially supported and cared for her father during his final years. He died in 2004. Forgiveness arrived, but too late to save a career. The next person's family even had to seek donations for his funeral. Number 5. Corey Haim. Corey Haim once received approximately 2,000 fan letters every week. Lucas, the Lost Boys and License to Drive, turned the Canadian boy into one of the biggest teenage idols of the 1980s. On screen, Corey had a vulnerability that immediately made audiences want to protect him. But Hollywood itself failed to protect him when fame pressure and drug use entered his life at an extremely young age. In the early 2000s, Corey lived with his mother, struggled financially, and sold personal memorabilia online. At one point, he even listed a tooth and locks of his hair for sale, a detail that sounds almost humorous until you understand the desperation behind it. Corey died in 2010 at the age of 38. The official report identified pneumonia as the primary cause, along with other health problems. His family struggled to cover the funeral expenses. But the next star had the entire world witness his decline through social media. Number 4. Aaron Carter. Aaron Carter was only 9 years old when his debut album brought him into a world of stadiums, television, and screaming fans. As Nick Carter's younger brother, Aaron, quickly developed his own fame through energetic pop songs, he earned millions of dollars before he was old enough to understand a tax return. But as an adult, Aaron claimed that his parents had poorly managed his finances and that most of the money was gone. In 2013, Aaron filed for bankruptcy with approximately $3.5 million in debt, most of it connected to taxes incurred during his teenage years. He later completed the bankruptcy process, but mental health problems, addiction, and family conflict continued to unfold publicly. On November 5, 2022, Aaron was found dead at his home at the age of 34. Authorities concluded that he drowned after inhaling compressed gas and taking sedative medication. The next story is far lonelier. Number 3. Bobby Driscoll. Bobby Driscoll was once Disney's first golden boy. He received a special Academy Award for Young Performers, appeared in Song of the South and Treasure Island, and later became both the voice and the live-action movement model for Peter Pan. Bobby represented the innocence the studio wanted to sell to American families, but when he entered puberty, his appearance changed, and a skin condition caused Disney to decide not to renew his contract. Without any transition plan, Bobby was pushed out of the system that had controlled almost his entire childhood. He began using drugs, was arrested, and spent time in compulsory treatment. In 1968, 2 children discovered Bobby's body inside an abandoned building in New York. He was only 31 years old and carried no identification, so he was buried in an unmarked grave. His family did not learn what had happened to him until nearly 2 years later. But the next position shows that a person can still return even when the scars never disappear. Number 2. Margot Kidder. For Margot Kidder, Lois Lane was not a woman who stood around waiting for Superman to rescue her. She was intelligent, determined, and willing to run directly into danger to uncover the truth. 4 Superman films turned Margot into a global icon, but a car accident in 1990 left her seriously injured, unable to work for an extended period, and trapped in a financial crisis. At the same time, her bipolar disorder, which had not yet been consistently treated, increasingly affected her life. In 1996, Margot disappeared for several days and was found in the Glendale area in a panicked condition, with her hair cut and damage to her teeth. Those images immediately became material for the tabloids. After receiving treatment, she moved to Montana, continued acting, and became a social activist. Margot died in 2018, and her death was ruled a suicide. Her story is painful, but the final position ended with the very gift that had once been given in love: Number 1. Marvin Gaye. Marvin Gaye did not simply sing soul music. He turned every recording into an intensely personal confession. What's Going On, Let's Get It On, and Sexual Healing showed that he could sing about love, war, and injustice while making millions of people feel understood. However, a childhood under his father's harsh control, broken marriages, tax, debt disputes with record companies, drug use, and paranoia repeatedly pushed him into crisis. Although Sexual Healing brought him a Grammy Award and a brilliant comeback, Marvin still returned to live with his parents in Los Angeles while he was in an extremely fragile mental state. On April 1st, 1984, Marvin intervened in an argument between his father and mother. The conflict escalated, and Marvin Gaye Sr. used a gun that his son had purchased to shoot him. Marvin died just one day before his 45th birthday, leaving approximately $9 million in debt, although his musical legacy later helped settle many of those financial obligations. The greatest tragedy is that the man who created music that healed the entire world could not find peace inside his own home. Marvin did not lack talent. He lacked a truly safe place to return to. Fame is not proof that someone is doing well. Wealth cannot replace sobriety, a healthy family, or trustworthy professionals. The most important lesson may be very simple. Do not hand complete control of your life to someone else. Do not treat seeking help as a sign of weakness. And do not turn another person's pain into entertainment simply because they once appeared on a screen. A contract needs to be read carefully. Taxes must be handled on time. Mental health needs to be addressed before a crisis occurs. Children working in the entertainment industry must have people who protect their money and rights with genuine independence. Those things may sound boring, but sometimes they are the only parachute standing between a star and a fall from which there is no recovery. Of all the people featured today who moved you or stayed in your memory the most, share their name and your thoughts in the comments. Do not forget to press like, subscribe to Hollywood Stars and Scars, and turn on notifications to join me for the next stories about fame, scars, and the truths Hollywood has tried to bury for decades. I will see you in the next story.
We worship these flawless screen icons, blindly trusting the fabricated personas broadcast directly into our living rooms. But you are now accessing the restricted case files of Hollywood Stars and Scars, an uncompromising investigation into the most devastating Hollywood scandals of our modern era. We are exposing the irreversible damage inflicted when unchecked egos and ultimate privilege collide with the real world. The descent from multi-million-dollar luxury to federal confinement is violently steep. How does a beloved, bright-eyed child actor go from signing autographs to standing over his mother's lifeless body, heavily armed, and plotting a massive political assassination? The golden facade is completely shattered. Let's look at the monsters hiding beneath. Behind the glitter, the scars remain. Welcome to Hollywood Stars and Scars. Number 20. Shannon Guess Richardson. On the surface, Shannon Guess Richardson was quietly climbing the cutthroat Hollywood ladder. Securing minor roles in massive global hits like The Walking Dead and The Vampire Diaries, she tasted the intoxicating allure of network television. For a working actor, these appearances represented the golden threshold of a promising career. Casting directors were just noticing the rising talent waiting in the wings. Yet the ambition masking her quiet life concealed an unimaginable descent into federal criminality. The Hollywood dream abruptly collapsed when an explosive investigation revealed a devastating plot. Law enforcement discovered she had weaponized the Postal Service, mailing threatening letters laced with the lethal toxin ricin to high-profile targets, including former President Barack Obama and New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg. The industry immediately severed all ties as court documents sealed her fate. Today, she is completely blacklisted, serving a staggering 18-year sentence, joining the tragic roster of actors currently rotting in jail. the desperate pursuit of notoriety traded a television legacy for a forgotten prison cell. Number 19. Ryan Grantham. Stepping onto the polished sets of massive franchises like Diary of a Wimpy Kid and the cultural juggernaut Riverdale, Ryan Grantham seemed destined for a lucrative, long-lasting career. To the public eye, he embodied the quintessential child star success story, radiating innocence and marketable charm on flashing red carpets. Beneath the carefully manufactured teen idol branding, however, a deeply disturbed reality was rapidly fracturing his psychological foundation. The entertainment industry was paralyzed when that wholesome illusion shattered, exposing a terrifyingly dark trajectory. Court documents later detailed an unthinkable crisis, a devastating act that took the life of his own mother, coupled with a highly classified, thwarted plot targeting the Canadian Prime Minister. Studios scrambled into complete silence as grim tabloid headlines permanently replaced his youthful headshots. Now stripped of his Hollywood privileges and a promising fortune, he faces the agonizing permanence of a life sentence, permanently joining the tragic roster of actors rotting in jail. The bright promise of child stardom merely provided a gilded mask for an irreversible psychological collapse. Number 18. Zach Avery. Real name Zachary Horwitz. Projecting the ultimate image of an ascendant Hollywood power player, Zachary Horwitz, known on screen as Zach Avery, curated a flawless illusion of industry dominance. Clad in bespoke suits, he sold investors on a gilded narrative of overnight success backed by his seemingly thriving production company. But his luxury estates and high-roller lifestyle were entirely funded by a staggering criminal deception. The facade spectacularly crumbled when federal agents uncovered a massive Ponzi scheme built on forged distribution contracts with titans like HBO and Netflix. Instead of acquiring legitimate film rights, Avery siphoned hundreds of millions of dollars to maintain his fabricated persona. The media erupted as pristine red carpet photos were instantly replaced by grim courtroom sketches. Stripped of his stolen empire, the disgraced actor now faces the brutal reality of federal prison, permanently cementing his status among the fallen talents currently rotting in jail. He successfully produced one of the most elaborate fictions in modern entertainment, only to discover that the illusion of wealth always comes with a devastating price. Number 17. Michael Jace. Commanding screens with quiet authority. Michael Jace built a respected career portraying figures meant to uphold the law. On the acclaimed series The Shield, his compelling performance as a police officer secured him industry praise and lucrative network wealth. To the public, he was a reliable talent, projecting unshakable stability. Yet behind the doors of his private residence, a volatile reality was silently fracturing his carefully maintained composure. The devastating collapse of his Hollywood facade occurred when authorities responded to a fatal domestic crisis at his home. The industry was paralyzed as police reports confirmed an unthinkable escalation that resulted in the tragic loss of his wife's life. Media outlets immediately replaced polished studio portraits with chilling courtroom footage. Now serving a staggering sentence of 40 years to life, he is permanently confined, joining the bleak roster of actors rotting in jail. The man who enforced fictional justice on screen shattered his own illusion with an irreversible, real-life tragedy. Number 16. Will Hayden. Ruling the landscape of reality television. Will Hayden built a rugged empire as the magnetic star of the Discovery Channel hit Sons of Guns. To millions, he was the ultimate patriarch, a charismatic firearms expert, projecting unwavering authority and family values across global screens. Yet far away from the carefully edited broadcast cuts, a highly guarded secret was festering in the shadows. This rugged Americana illusion catastrophically imploded when harrowing police reports surfaced detailing a concealed history of deeply disturbing predatory behavior. Law enforcement dismantled his empire overnight, exposing an unspeakable exploitation of minors that immediately triggered a devastating PR crisis. Studio executives frantically scrubbed his name from existence as chilling court documents confirmed the allegations. Stripped of his television throne, the disgraced reality star now faces the absolute finality of a life sentence permanently etched into the roster of figures currently rotting in jail. The man who built a fortune, projecting uncompromising protection, ultimately weaponized his influence to destroy the most vulnerable. Number 15. Allison Mack. Radiating girl-next-door charm on the hit television series Smallville, Allison Mack captured the hearts of millions as the fiercely loyal confidant Chloe Sullivan. For over a decade, she walked glittering red carpets and commanded massive fan conventions, carefully cultivating a pristine, relatable brand. However, beneath this wholesome network persona, a chilling hidden life was quietly operating in the shadows. The public illusion completely shattered when federal authorities exposed her high-ranking role within NXIVM, a highly secretive and abusive dark cult. Tabloid headlines ignited a devastating PR crisis as court documents revealed she had actively orchestrated a deeply coercive operation recruiting vulnerable women into a disturbing syndicate. Her legacy was instantaneously rewritten, from beloved television icon to federal criminal, as she formally pleaded guilty to racketeering charges. Stripped of her immense Hollywood influence, she traded a celebrated career for the harsh reality of a prison cell. The ultimate betrayal of trust proved that the most comforting on-screen smiles can disguise the most terrifying off-screen realities. Number 14. Drew Dressel. Conquering physically impossible obstacles, Drew Dressel secured his status as a modern-day superhero, claiming ultimate victory on Season 11 of American Ninja Warrior. Millions watched in awe as he dominated grueling courses, building a highly marketable, family-friendly brand rooted in athletic supremacy. He was the reigning champion, celebrated with roaring applause and lucrative sponsorships. Yet, beneath the manufactured aura of an invincible idol, a profoundly disturbing reality was actively concealed from his devoted fanbase. The inspirational facade shattered instantly when federal investigators dismantled his empire, exposing a highly classified electronic trail linked to the exploitation of minors. The network immediately severed ties, aggressively erasing him from future broadcasts, as terrifying court documents outlined the severe allegations. Today, the disgraced athlete is entirely blacklisted from television history, trading championship glory for a grim existence. Sentenced to a staggering 121 months in federal custody, he is permanently confined among the bleak roster of figures rotting in jail. Physical strength proved completely useless in outrunning a legacy of monstrous deceit. Number 13. Colin Walker, stage name KR. Carving a distinct lane in music and cinema. Colin Walker, known as the rising rapper KR, projected the ultimate image of a multi-hyphenate talent. Landing a coveted role in the blockbuster Superfly, he rapidly ascended the Hollywood ranks. To the public, he was an undeniable star, leveraging magnetic stage presence into mainstream success. Yet, behind the curated social media swagger, a deeply predatory operation was destroying lives. This glossy facade shattered violently when authorities dismantled his network of deceit, exposing a horrific pattern of abuse. Court documents confirmed he systematically weaponized his industry influence, using fabricated promises of career advancement to lure and sexually assault vulnerable women and underage girls. A devastating PR crisis crushed his trajectory as chilling testimonies permanently replaced his music videos. Now entirely disgraced, the former artist is serving a colossal sentence of 50 years to life, joining the bleak roster of figures rotting in jail. He masterfully sold the intoxicating dream of Hollywood stardom, only to trap his targets in an irreversible nightmare. Number 12. Joe Exotic, real name: Joe Maldonado Passage. Captivating global audiences. Joe Maldonado Passage, known as the eccentric Joe Exotic, achieved unprecedented viral superstardom as the centerpiece of the Tiger King documentary. For a brief, surreal moment, he was the undisputed king of streaming television, surrounded by majestic big cats and internet applause. Millions tuned in, captivated by his chaotic showmanship and unapologetic rural empire. The intoxicating rush of viral notoriety merely accelerated a deeply destructive obsession operating behind the gates of his private zoo. This bizarre spectacle completely collapsed when federal investigators exposed a highly orchestrated, terrifying vendetta. Media fascination rapidly mutated into condemnation as his criminal enterprise dominated tabloid headlines. Court files revealed a desperate murder-for-hire plot targeting animal rights activist Carol Baskin, compounded by severe wildlife violations that instantly dismantled his eccentric hero persona. Stripped of his internet crown, the disgraced reality star faces a catastrophic sentence. He remains exiled, joining the bleak roster of figures currently rotting in jail. The relentless pursuit of an untamed kingdom fashioned the exact cage he can never escape. Number 11. Skylar DeLeon. Hovering on the periphery of 90s childhood stardom, Skylar DeLeon secured a coveted spot in the massive cultural phenomenon Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. In the glowing halo of network television, even a minor appearance seemed like a golden ticket to Hollywood longevity. To audiences, the bright-eyed talent represented the boundless optimism of an era sharing the screen with iconic, heavily branded heroes. Yet far removed from the flashing studio lights, a chilling financial desperation was silently consuming their reality. This nostalgic illusion permanently fractured when investigators exposed a highly calculated, devastating conspiracy born of pure greed. Court files outlined a terrifyingly methodical plot targeting a trusting couple with the sole intention of hijacking their luxury yacht. Wholesome television reruns were completely overshadowed by grim courtroom exhibits as the catastrophic betrayal was formally confirmed. Now condemned to death row, the disgraced actor is permanently exiled, joining the darkest tier of figures currently rotting in jail. A brief brush with childhood fame merely served as a fleeting prelude to absolute moral bankruptcy. The most effective camouflage is not darkness, but blinding stadium lights. Behavioral science confirms that society naturally assigns morality to fame, creating a dangerous psychological blind spot. When we confuse a curated broadcast persona with genuine character, we actively ignore the subtle, escalating red flags of coercion. Real safety demands a radical shift in awareness, evaluating individuals by their private accountability rather than their public charisma. Trust must be verified through consistent behavior, never assumed through scripted charm. The loudest applause often silences the quietest cries for help. The next case file proves exactly how easily a trusted figure becomes an undeniable threat. Number 10. Paul Teutul Sr. Roaring onto the network landscape with undeniable blue-collar swagger, Paul Teutul Sr. forged a custom motorcycle empire that completely dominated reality television. As the unmistakable, imposing patriarch of American Chopper, his booming authority transformed a family garage into a global merchandising juggernaut. He was the ultimate symbol of rugged Americana, instantly recognizable behind the handlebars of chrome masterpieces, celebrated by legions of fans and lucrative sponsors. However, Beneath the thunderous applause and high-octane ratings, the financial engine driving his televised success was catastrophic. This impenetrable illusion oxidized publicly when a brutal avalanche of lawsuits and overwhelming business debt dragged his enterprise into a devastating arena. Corporate boardrooms rapidly replaced garage bays as severe financial mismanagement forced the legendary builder to file for bankruptcy. Mountains of unpaid invoices permanently tarnished his rugged brand, leading to the total liquidation of his sprawling luxury estate. The man who built a television dynasty out of raw steel ultimately watched his golden legacy rust away under the crushing weight of financial ruin. Number 9. Zara Fithian. Commanding the silver screen with lethal grace, Zara Fithian leveraged her elite martial arts mastery into the highest echelons of the blockbuster universe. Securing a coveted role in Marvel's global juggernaut, Doctor Strange, she stood alongside cinematic titans, projecting the ultimate image of an unstoppable action star. Her fierce on-screen power promised a limitless Hollywood trajectory. Yet, hidden completely behind choreographed fight sequences, a profoundly disturbing reality was operating in the shadows. This invincible facade shattered irreversibly when police investigations unearthed a harrowing domestic secret, triggering a devastating PR crisis. Court documents detailed how she and her husband orchestrated a horrific pattern of abuse, instantly vaporizing her pristine industry status. Major studios rapidly erased her from existence as the terrifying allegations were formally validated. Stripped of her blockbuster legacy, the disgraced actress is serving an 8-year sentence, joining the roster of figures currently rotting in jail. The physical prowess that built her cinematic empire could not outrun the consequences of a monstrous double life. Number 8. Amy Lone Locane. Capturing the effortless cool of early 90s cinema, Amy Locane skyrocketed to prominence in the cult classic Cry Baby. Securing a coveted role on the television juggernaut Melrose Place, she embodied the quintessential ingenue, projecting a pristine image across magazine covers and glowing red carpets. Yet far removed from the manicured sets of primetime soap operas, a catastrophic personal choice was about to irrevocably shatter her charmed existence. This glittering facade was obliterated when police reports detailed a devastating vehicular crash fueled by severe intoxication. The blinding flash of paparazzi cameras was rapidly replaced by the stark glare of police lights as authorities confirmed the tragic loss of an innocent life. Studio executives immediately erased her from the industry landscape while a brutal legal saga dominated tabloid headlines. Now stripped of her television legacy, the disgraced actress is permanently confined, joining the grim roster of former stars currently rotting in jail. The pristine image she sold to millions could not shield her from the devastating wreckage of her own reality. Number 7. Jared Fogle. Becoming an unlikely cultural phenomenon. Jared Fogle transformed a highly publicized weight loss journey into an unprecedented marketing triumph for the Subway fast food empire. To the American public, he was the ultimate inspirational everyman, radiating approachability across thousands of television commercials, while securing massive corporate wealth. Yet beneath the wholesome endorsements, a deeply sinister double life was shielded from his audience. The multi-million-dollar illusion imploded violently when federal authorities raided his sprawling residence, exposing a highly classified network of predatory behavior. A devastating PR crisis instantly paralyzed the corporation as terrifying court files detailed his extensive involvement with child exploitation materials. Executives frantically erased his existence from their history as the horrifying allegations were formally validated. Stripped of his lucrative sponsorships, the disgraced pitchman traded his corporate throne for a grim federal sentence of over 15 years. He successfully sold a highly lucrative illusion of wholesome transformation, only to reveal a monstrous reality that permanently destroyed his legacy. Number 6. Harvey Weinstein. Dominating the cinematic landscape as an untouchable titan, Harvey Weinstein built an empire of prestige by co-founding the legendary Miramax Studios. His name was synonymous with Academy Awards, glittering premieres, and absolute industry control. To star in one of his productions was to guarantee a golden ticket to Hollywood royalty. Yet behind the velvet ropes of his elite suites, a systemic reign of terror was actively protected by a complicit industry. This monumental illusion spectacularly collapsed when explosive investigative reports exposed decades of horrific, predatory behavior and profound abuse of power. The terrifying revelations instantly ignited the global #MeToo movement, permanently shattering the dark silence that shielded his actions. A devastating PR crisis rapidly morphed into a historic criminal trial as chilling testimonies echoed through packed courtrooms. Now completely stripped of his elite status, the disgraced mogul is serving a multi-decade prison sentence. The man who once orchestrated the brightest cinematic dreams ultimately engineered an inescapable nightmare of his own making. Number 5. Todd Chrisley. Broadcasting a meticulously curated life of affluent Southern royalty, Todd Chrisley engineered a highly lucrative reality television empire as the flamboyant patriarch of Chrisley Knows Best. To his millions of viewers, he was the picture-perfect mogul, leveraging razor-sharp wit and extravagant family values into massive network success. Every camera angle was expertly staged to showcase sprawling mansions, designer wardrobes, and an unbreakable clan. However, the glittering facade violently crumbled when a sweeping federal indictment exposed the rotten foundation beneath his wealthy lifestyle. The pristine brand instantly vaporized as prosecutors revealed an elaborate multi-million-dollar conspiracy involving systemic bank fraud and deliberate tax evasion. Gilded red carpets were immediately swapped for grim courthouse steps, resulting in a devastating 12-year federal prison sentence. While a highly controversial presidential pardon in May 2025 ultimately released him from custody, his broadcast dynasty and public reputation were permanently eradicated. He successfully sold an intoxicating illusion of untouchable prosperity, only to prove that the brightest television fortunes are often financed by pure deceit. Number 4. Julie Chrisley. Standing steadfast beside her flamboyant husband, Julie Chrisley projected the ultimate image of a devoted matriarch on the series Chrisley Knows Best. To millions of weekly viewers, she was the grounded anchor of a reality television dynasty radiating Southern charm across endless red carpets. Her manicured persona effectively sanitized their lucrative brand of aspirational wealth. This pristine domestic illusion fractured violently when federal investigators dismantled the empire's rotten financial core. Authorities exposed a massive, coordinated conspiracy, revealing her as an active accomplice in systemic loan fraud and deliberate tax evasion. The wholesome network narrative was instantly eclipsed by damning court documents, leaving studio executives scrambling to distance themselves from the sprawling deception. Stripped of her reality kingdom, the disgraced star traded luxury estates for a stark 7-year federal prison sentence. Although a controversial presidential pardon ultimately freed her, the polished brand she spent years constructing was permanently incinerated. She sold a comforting myth of Southern perfection, only to prove that the warmest on-screen smiles can conceal the coldest crimes. Number 3. Joe Sun. Capitalizing on the colossal success of the global comedy blockbuster Austin Powers, Joe Sun, known on screen as the iconic henchman Random Task, solidified a memorable place in pop culture history. He parlayed this eccentric cinematic breakout into a recognizable Hollywood brand, walking premiere carpets alongside industry legends. Audiences perceived him as an amusing, harmless tough guy whose physical presence guaranteed laughs. However, lurking beneath this comedic persona was a chilling, cold case that eventually unraveled his entire existence. The industry faced a devastating PR crisis when evidence abruptly linked the actor to a deeply disturbing, decades-old investigation involving severe abuse. This entertaining illusion completely vaporized as grim court documents detailed a terrifying double life. Stripped of his status, he was handed a catastrophic life sentence. The devastating reality worsened behind bars, resulting in an additional manslaughter conviction following a fatal altercation with a fellow inmate. The man who built a career playing a cartoonish villain ultimately manifested a genuine monstrosity that no script could ever contain. Number 2. Josh Duggar. Anchoring the wildly successful series 19 Kids and Counting, Josh Duggar was presented as the ultimate model of conservative, family-first values. As the eldest sibling of the massive television clan, he commanded a lucrative platform built on projecting an irreproachable, wholesome lifestyle to millions of devoted viewers. Yet far removed from the carefully edited network broadcasts and pious public appearances, a horrifying double life operated in the shadows. This highly profitable illusion collapsed into a devastating PR disaster when federal investigators raided his private sanctuary. Law enforcement uncovered a concealed digital trail directly linking him to deeply disturbing child exploitation materials. The network immediately canceled the flagship series, scrambling to distance itself as damning court files validated the terrifying allegations. Now stripped of his broadcast legacy, the disgraced star is serving a stark sentence of over 12 years in federal custody. He monetized a flawless image of moral superiority, only to harbor a monstrous reality that permanently dismantled his empire. Number 1. Danny Masterson. Defining a generation of comedy on the massive sitcom That 70s Show, Danny Masterson projected the effortless cool of an era as the iconic rebel Stephen Hyde. He navigated elite Hollywood circles, leveraging unparalleled network syndication into a highly lucrative, untouchable career. Behind the velvet ropes of exclusive VIP events, he maintained a highly marketable, carefree swagger. Yet, shielded by formidable power structures, a deeply destructive reality was actively concealed from the public eye. This prime-time illusion catastrophically shattered when an explosive criminal trial exposed a terrifyingly methodical pattern of abuse. A devastating PR crisis paralyzed his trajectory, as chilling court documents outlined harrowing testimonies from multiple women. Major studios aggressively erased his legacy from modern platforms once the severe allegations were formally validated. Stripped of his television throne, the disgraced star was handed a staggering sentence of 30 years to life, permanently joining the bleak roster of actors rotting in jail. The vintage aesthetic that built his empire ultimately served as a smokescreen for an irreversible nightmare. The brightest spotlights routinely blind us to the crumbling human beings standing directly underneath them. These Hollywood scandals are rarely just criminal anomalies. They are the suffocating gasps of isolated souls breaking under an industry that weaponizes vanity and ignores deep psychological fractures. Here at Hollywood Stars and Scars, we open these files to issue a stark warning. The most profound victory in this toxic ecosystem isn't securing the leading role. It's possessing the quiet courage to walk away intact. When the heavy velvet curtains finally drop, The silence of a forgotten icon is absolutely deafening. The ultimate industry illusion isn't the blockbuster itself. It's the desperate belief that a flawless smile hides an innocent soul. To decode the heavily guarded files that publicists fight to bury, subscribe to Hollywood Stars and Scars. Join us to unlock the vault on the most chilling Hollywood scandals, ensuring no restricted tape remains unseen. Legends are etched in gold, but the truth is always written in scars. Hollywood once made millions of people believe that the stars on the silver screen were almost invincible. But there is a truth colder than anything ever shown in a movie. Some actors stood before the cameras while their bodies were deteriorating day by day. Some hid cancer beneath wigs. Some had to keep a swollen arm elevated all night just to perform a simple gesture the following morning. And one man dropped his sword in the middle of a scene and never returned to the set. Some of these stories reveal extraordinary courage. Others raise disturbing questions about silence money and the way Hollywood treats human beings when the cameras are still rolling. What troubles me most is not simply the fact that these artists continued performing. It is the way their pain was sometimes mistaken for unprofessional behavior, addiction, weakness, or merely an obstacle to the production schedule. These secrets remained hidden beneath the glare of premiere lights for decades. But today, we are going to look directly at what truly happened before the director called cut for the final time. If you want me to explore more movies, television shows, or Hollywood secrets, leave a comment below. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel as we begin exploring its main stories together. Behind the glitter, the scars remain. Welcome to Hollywood Stars and Scars. Number 20. Jean Harlow. Jean Harlow was once the embodiment of daring glamour during MGM's golden age. Her platinum blonde hair, rebellious beauty, and inimitable presence made her one of Hollywood's greatest icons of the 1930s. But in Saratoga, the paleness audiences saw was not entirely the result of makeup. Harlow was genuinely, gravely ill. The color drained from her face, her body began to swell, and her strength disappeared so quickly that she had to lean on Clark Gable between takes to keep her balance. In the movie, Harlow's character was supposed to have a fever. In real life, her condition was far more serious. She suffered from nausea, abdominal pain, extreme fatigue, and abnormal fluid retention. Harlow told Gable that she felt terrible and needed to be taken back to her dressing room. However, the studio doctor believed that she merely had the flu and an inflamed gallbladder. It was a catastrophic misdiagnosis. Harlow's kidneys were gradually losing their ability to function, allowing waste to accumulate in her blood as her body became increasingly swollen. By the time Clark Gable visited Harlow at her home, her condition had reached a critical stage. Her breath carried a characteristic sign of end-stage kidney failure. On June 6, 1937, she was admitted to Good Samaritan Hospital. Harlow fell into a coma and died the following morning at only 26 years old. But Saratoga still had to be completed. Mary Dees replaced her in scenes filmed from behind or with her face concealed beneath the brim of a hat, while Paula Winslow recorded her missing lines. The movie lived on even though its star was gone. Number 19. Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe began Something's Got to Give while suffering from acute sinusitis, a fever, and a serious upper respiratory infection. Doctors advised postponing production. Fox began filming without her on April 23, 1962 anyway. During the first 6 weeks, Monroe repeatedly remained bedridden, submitted medical certificates, and came to the studio only on days when her body was strong enough to endure it. On April 30th, she attempted to appear, but she was too weak to complete a full day of work. By May, the shooting schedule was being arranged around the brief periods when Monroe had enough energy to perform. Her swimming pool scene became a glamorous publicity image. Outside the frame, however, her health remained deeply unstable. What is infuriating is that the studio began claiming that she was exaggerating or pretending to be ill, even though medical examinations had confirmed her condition. On June 4th, producer Henry Weinstein offered to personally drive Monroe to the set. She was too weak to leave her home. 4 days later, Fox fired Marilyn Monroe and demanded $750,000 in damages. Of the 32 scheduled working days, she'd been able to appear for only 12. The total amount of usable footage lasted approximately 7.5 minutes. The public image was that of an unreliable star who had brought production to a standstill. But the medical records told a different story. They described a woman who was genuinely ill, while a massive studio viewed her health primarily as a financial problem that needed to be resolved.
Number 18. Carolyn Johns.
In 1982, Carolyn Jones took on the role of Myrna Clegg in Capital. Audiences knew her for her striking beauty, captivating voice, and unmistakable presence. But while appearing in the series, Jones was fighting colon cancer. The disease returned after treatment and then spread to her liver and stomach. The pain grew increasingly severe. On some days, she was too weak to remain standing throughout an entire scene, so part of her performance had to be completed from a wheelchair. Whenever she felt strong enough, Jones moved herself back into position before the cameras. She told her colleagues that she was receiving treatment for a stomach ulcer, never revealing that she had cancer. Chemotherapy caused her hair to fall out, so away from the set, Jones often covered her head with lace caps and ribbons. In front of the camera, she wore wigs to preserve her character's appearance. Marla Adams temporarily replaced her during one of Jones's absences, but Jones returned and completed the first season. When her health no longer allowed her to continue, she left the series in 1983. In July of that year, she fell into a coma at her West Hollywood home. Carolyn Jones died on August 3rd, with Peter Bailey Britton beside her. What leaves me with a lump in my throat is that most viewers who watched Capital had no idea how much strength every ordinary scene demanded from her. She was not merely memorizing lines and expressing emotion. She was also fighting to sit upright, maintain her composure, and conceal a truth that her body was constantly revealing.
Number 17. Tyrone Power.
On November 15, 1958, in Madrid, Tyrone Power was performing a sword-fighting scene in Solomon and Sheba. Power had once been one of Hollywood's most prominent leading men, with a classically handsome face and the presence of someone born to portray adventurous heroes. That day he was dueling George Sanders. The scene had been filmed several times when Power suddenly dropped his sword. He clutched his left arm, said that he could not continue, and was helped off the set.
In his dressing room, Power was given a little brandy. George Sanders saw him twisting in his chair, gripping his arm and turning pale beneath his makeup. What is haunting is that Power still tried to smile. He insisted that he would recover and be able to return. But within minutes, his condition deteriorated rapidly. Power was carried from the studio and taken to a hospital in Madrid. The doctors had no opportunity to save him. He died from a massive heart attack at the age of 44.
Power had completed approximately 2/3 of the movie. Yul Brynner was chosen to replace him, and most of Power's scenes had to be filmed again. In the released version, he can be seen only in a few distant battle shots. Almost all of Tyrone Power's final performance was erased from the production. One of the greatest stars of his generation disappeared from the very movie he had nearly sacrificed his life to complete. Number 16. Clark Gable. Before production began, Gable had lost a significant amount of weight. He was 59 years old, had smoked for many years, and was required to work in Nevada in temperatures approaching 100 degrees Fahrenheit, or roughly 38 degrees Celsius. The schedule stretched on with endless periods of waiting horseback riding sequences and scenes involving the roundup of wild horses across a dry lake bed. Stunt performers handled the most dangerous falls, but Gable still had to ride for weeks, practice roping horses, and sit beneath the blazing heat while production ran 3 weeks beyond schedule. Gable's contract paid him $48,000 for every week the movie continued past its deadline. It was an enormous amount of money, but no amount could make his body young again. Principal photography ended on November 4th, 1960. Just 2 days later, Gable experienced severe chest pain at his home in Encino and was taken to Hollywood Presbyterian Hospital with a coronary thrombosis. For 10 days, his condition appeared to improve, leading his family to believe that the worst had passed. On November 16th, Gable had dinner with his pregnant wife. Afterward, he sat upright in bed and then gently lowered his head back onto the pillow. He died moments later. I cannot claim that the production was the sole cause of his death, but the chilling sequence of punishing weeks of labor, followed by a heart attack only 2 days after filming ended, makes The Misfits feel forever like a farewell no one knew was coming. Number 15. Rita Hayworth. During the filming of The Wrath of God in Mexico in 1971, Hayworth only needed to remember a 4-word sentence. Frank Langella asked her character why she was there. The answer was simple: because God is here. But take after take, Hayworth could not retain the sentence in her memory. Eventually, a crew member had to lie on the floor directly beneath her feet and whisper the line. Hayworth listened, repeated the sentence, and completed the scene. The entire crew applauded. She smiled, apparently unaware that some of the applause carried mockery. Oh my God, that detail genuinely makes me uncomfortable. A woman who had once perfectly controlled every glance, every step, and every movement before the camera, had now been turned into a joke because of a condition she herself could not understand. Large cue cards were placed near the cameras throughout the remainder of production. Robert Mitchum and Frank Langella often helped bring Hayworth to the set in the morning. Makeup artist Lynn Del Cale took her into a private room, taught her a single line, escorted her outside to film it, and then brought her back inside to learn the next one. The movie was completed that way, one line at a time. At the time, Hayworth's condition was often blamed on alcohol and stress. Instead of compassion, she received judgmental looks, whispered comments, and a loneliness from which fame could not protect her. Number 14. Henry Fonda. Henry Fonda was 75 years old while making On Golden Pond. He suffered from chronic heart disease and relied on a pacemaker to regulate his heartbeat. Fonda tired easily, so the crew had to monitor and protect him carefully throughout filming in New Hampshire. Scenes in the cold water posed the greatest danger. During the boat accident sequence, Fonda and Doug McKeon wore wetsuits beneath their costumes and clung to rocks in the September water. In another scene, a motorboat sped past a canoe with enough force to overturn Henry Fonda and Katharine Hepburn into the water. Crew members immediately rushed into the lake, pulled him out, and wrapped his body in blankets. Fonda continued until the movie was finished, but his health declined rapidly afterward. He was too weak to attend the premiere and was also unable to appear at the Academy Awards. Jane Fonda accepted the Oscar on her father's behalf. 5 months later, on August 12, 1982,
Henry Fonda died from heart disease. On Golden Pond became a tender farewell between a father and daughter on screen, while also serving as the final chapter of his career. Audiences saw a stubborn, humorous, and vulnerable older man. They did not see the pacemaker, the blankets beside the lake, or the moments when the crew had to determine whether he still possessed enough strength to enter the next scene. Number 13. Humphrey Bogart. Near the end of 1955, Bogart was still arriving at the studio at 9 in the morning and working until 6 in the evening. He had a persistent cough, severe fatigue, difficulty swallowing, and such intense pain that tears flowed involuntarily during close-up shots. One afternoon, Rod Steiger saw Bogart sitting alone at Columbia Studios, even though his work for the day had already ended. Bogart explained that the crew needed to reshoot his close-ups because his eyes looked too watery. Steiger assumed it was merely an ordinary irritation. Only later did Steiger understand that those tears had come from pain. Bogart completed the movie, but by January 1956 he could no longer endure the coughing, and eating had become increasingly difficult. On March 1st, surgeons removed his esophagus, 2 lymph nodes, and 1 rib. The cancer continued to spread. When Bogart could no longer walk down the stairs by himself, a small elevator originally used to transport food was modified to carry him and his wheelchair between floors. The man who had defined the image of toughness in American cinema was ultimately trapped inside his own home. It was not because he lacked willpower, but because illness does not care how famous someone is. The Harder They Fall was the title of a story about collapse. No one realized at the time that the title was also describing the man at the center of the movie. Number 12. Elizabeth Montgomery. During the filming of Deadline for Murder, Elizabeth Montgomery repeatedly suffered from abdominal pain, exhaustion, and weight loss. But she still completed the exterior scenes and numerous lengthy passages of dialogue. After she returned home, Robert Foxworth noticed how visibly weak she'd become and urged her to see a doctor. Only days later, doctors discovered that she had stage 4 colorectal cancer that had already spread to her liver and lungs. Although she underwent surgery, the disease had progressed too far, so Montgomery chose to return to her Beverly Hills home to be with her family. Deadline for Murder aired on May 9th, with audiences still seeing her as calm and powerful on the screen. 9 days later, she died with Robert Foxworth and her 3 children beside her, turning the role into a final farewell that no one had recognized. Number 11. Edward G. Robinson. At the age of 79, Edward G. Robinson was suffering from terminal bladder cancer and was almost completely deaf while filming Soylent Green. People had to speak directly into his ear between scenes, but most of the cast did not know how serious his illness had become. Despite his failing health, Robinson never missed a working day, never arrived late, and maintained his complete professionalism before the cameras. His final performance was the scene in which Saul Roth lies in a white room, watches images of nature from a vanished world, and says goodbye. Charlton Heston cried real tears without knowing that Robinson was also performing the final scene of his life. Robinson died on January 26, 1973, before the movie was released, turning the sequence into a haunting farewell to cinema, to the audience, and to life itself. Number 10. Kay Kendall. When Once More with Feeling began filming in Paris in April 1959, Kay Kendall was suffering from leukemia, but she had only been told that she was iron deficient. Unaware of the truth, she continued enduring high fevers and an increasingly weakened body while completing lengthy passages of dialogue, physical comedy scenes with Yul Brynner, and a schedule filled with constant costume changes. Her family may have wanted to protect her emotional well-being, But that silence also caused Kendall to continue working, without understanding what was happening inside her own body. Near the end of the movie, Kendall's character cries while watching Brynner conduct an orchestra, then turns and blows him a kiss as a farewell. She completed the movie approximately 2 months before dying in London on September 6, 1959. The moment on screen later became a haunting goodbye, while also raising the question of whether concealing a diagnosis is truly compassionate when every person has the right to know the condition of their own body.
Number 9. Boris Karloff.
At the age of 80, Boris Karloff suffered from severe emphysema and arthritis, with only about half of one lung functioning normally. Between scenes, he required oxygen and a wheelchair. When it was time to film, the crew helped him stand, removed his mask, and handed him a cane so he could walk into position. Despite his failing physical condition, Karloff performed the lengthy Appointment in Samara monologue in a single take, demonstrating astonishing control over his voice and timing.
During the climax of the drive-in theater, his character still walks toward the gunman, uses the very cane that supported him in real life to knock away the weapon, and subdues his opponent. Karloff transformed his real-life weakness into strength on screen. What deserves admiration is not that he pushed his body beyond its limits, but that he preserved his dignity and artistry when his health no longer allowed him to do so easily.
Number 08. Robert Donat. During the production of The Inn of the Sixth Happiness in 1958, Robert Donat struggled with severe asthma, frequently had difficulty breathing, and needed to rest between scenes. Although he nearly collapsed and even suffered a stroke during production, he returned to the set after partially recovering to complete his role alongside Ingrid Bergman.
In the final scene, Donat's character says that they may never meet again, and then bids farewell, causing Bergman to cry because his health had already become so fragile. Not long afterward, doctors discovered that Donat had a large brain tumor. He died on June 9, 1958, before the movie was released, leaving his on-screen goodbye as a genuine farewell to the audience.
Number 7. Rock Hudson. Rock Hudson was diagnosed with AIDS before joining Dynasty in late 1984, but his condition was kept secret from the studio and his fellow cast members. During filming, Hudson lost weight, had difficulty speaking, and became increasingly dependent on cue cards, forcing the writers to end his character's storyline earlier than planned. The most controversial scene was his kiss with Linda Evans, who was not told the reason he would agree to perform only a brief, closed-mouth kiss.
Hudson died on October 2, 1985.
His story reflects the conflict between a patient's right to privacy and the responsibility to provide appropriate information to the people involved. During an era when AIDS was surrounded by fear and limited understanding, stigma drove many people into silence, creating situations that accurate medical knowledge and compassion could have handled more humanely.
Number 6. Bela Lugosi. Bela Lugosi suffered from severe sciatica and relied on morphine to control the pain. Even so, he refused to use cue cards for the lengthy speech that opened with his confession that he had no home. Lugosi delivered the entire passage from memory and received spontaneous applause from the crew. During the final fight with the octopus, a stunt performer had to replace him in the distant shots, partially concealing the actor's true physical condition. Immediately after the movie was completed, Lugosi voluntarily entered Los Angeles General Hospital to receive treatment for his drug dependence. He publicly admitted that he had used morphine and methadone for years because of prolonged pain. What deserves admiration is not merely that Lugosi continued working, but also the courage he displayed by acknowledging the problem and seeking help during a period when drug addiction was still regarded as something shameful. Number 5. Ingrid Bergman. Near the end of 1981, Ingrid Bergman filmed A Woman Called Golda after her breast cancer had metastasized and her right arm had become severely swollen with lymphedema following surgery. Although no company was willing to insure her, she continued working for 9 weeks in Israel and London, enduring heavy layers of makeup, lengthy speeches, and constant costume changes, while her health steadily deteriorated. To perform Golda Meir's characteristic gesture of raising both arms, Bergman had to keep her swollen arm elevated throughout the night to reduce the fluid, creating a brief window the following morning in which the scene could be filmed. She completed the production and died on August 29, 1982, her 67th birthday. Her final performance was not a Hollywood miracle, but the result of pain labor and extraordinary determination. Number 4. John Cazale. John Cazale had terminal lung cancer when he joined The Deer Hunter, causing the studio to want him removed because he could not be insured. Director Michael Cimino immediately arranged for all of Cazale's scenes to be filmed first, while Meryl Streep accepted the role of Linda, largely so she could remain beside him. Robert De Niro also helped cover the insurance costs, allowing Cazale to continue working, even as his health visibly declined. Cazale completed the wedding scenes, the bar scenes, and the argument at the hunting cabin before returning to New York for treatment. He died on March 13, 1978, with Meryl Streep beside him, 9 months before the movie was released. His story became a moving exception in Hollywood where colleagues altered their plans, accepted roles, and used their own money to protect a dying friend's right to continue acting. Number 3. Spencer Tracy. Spencer Tracy entered production while suffering from heart disease, diabetes, and several serious respiratory problems. Director Stanley Kramer and Katharine Hepburn had to place their salaries in escrow in case he became unable to finish the movie. Tracy worked for only 3 hours each morning, while Hepburn drove him to and from the set, rehearsed his lines with him, and cared for him. On some days, he still delivered powerful performances, but on others, he barely had enough strength to stand before the cameras. 3 days before filming ended, Tracy calmly said that the crew already had enough footage to release the production if he died during the night. On May 24th, he completed his final speech about love, family, and the courage to confront prejudice. 17 days later, Tracy died at home. The movie had been completed in time, but he never had the opportunity to see how audiences received his final performance. Number 2. Patrick Swayze. After completing the pilot episode of The Beast, Patrick Swayze was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer in January 2008. Although he was undergoing treatment and his body was growing increasingly thin and weak, he returned to Chicago to film all 13 episodes on a schedule that often lasted approximately 12 hours a day. Swayze also tried to perform many of his own fight scenes, chase sequences, and stunts, while the crew continuously monitored his health and adjusted the filming schedule around him. In November 2008, Swayze completed the season and then returned to treatment. His story demonstrates extraordinary resilience, but it should not become the standard by which other patients are judged. Courage does not necessarily mean continuing to work or enduring pain to the absolute limit. Sometimes choosing to stop and care for yourself is also an expression of strength. Number 1. Buster Keaton. In 1965, Buster Keaton traveled to Spain to film A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum when he was already 70 years old and weakened by an undiagnosed illness. Director Richard Lester used stunt performer Mick Dillon for the distant running scenes, while Keaton still handled his own close-ups and the important comic moments. Despite his declining health, he insisted on performing his final fall himself, running into a tree trunk, stiffening his body, and falling backward, because only he could control the precise timing of that moment. After filming ended in November, Keaton was diagnosed with lung cancer in January 1966, but his family told him only that he had severe bronchitis. He died on February 1st, 8 months before the movie was released. When audiences laughed at the scene in which he ran into the tree, they had no idea that they were watching one of the final performances of the artist who had transformed falling into an immortal language of cinema. To me, these stars should not be remembered only because they continued performing while ill. They also remind us to see artists as real human beings with limitations, fears, and the right to receive care. Which person's story affected you most deeply, and which final performance made you see the movie in a completely different way? Share your thoughts in the comments. Do not forget to like this video, subscribe to Ryan's Hollywood Uncovered, and turn on notifications so you never miss the secrets, tragedies, and stories Hollywood buried for decades. Thank you for spending this time with me as we looked back at the human beings behind the glamour, and I will see you in the next video where another old reel will be opened and a truth thought to have disappeared will be told once again.